So you do countenance then a class of meaningless, unverifiable metaphysical sentences.
Yes, but it's way out, as I feel that this is, because I don't even consider it necessary for meaningfulness that a sentence be indirectly connectable with observation, that it be part of a network. I wouldn't require that the sentence be indirectly verifiable in this sense, that there be a set of sentences which together have what I've called critical mass, and that they together will imply an observationally testable situation, and would include the sentence in question, and would lose its critical mass when that was removed from the class. That would be a way of explaining what it would mean, perhaps, for a sentence to have empirical content at all. It would share empirical content in this this essential way. I wouldn't insist on that by any means, and I don't think that the bulk of sentences in history, or perhaps in various social sciences, nor perhaps all of them, even in serious, rigorous physics, meet even that test. And I don't think that for that reason they should be rejected as meaningless, because they are sentences that we have postulated or accepted. We've conjectured them, accepted them, because they seem to fit in so nicely with the theory that is working. Perhaps considerations of symmetry, perhaps it seems to fill a nice little conceptual gap. And I think that furthermore they can be vital to the progress of science, because they are, I imagine, a very important, maybe overwhelmingly large part of the heuristics of the fashioning of worthwhile scientific hypotheses. That is to say, hypotheses that are worth testing, rather than just frittering away one's time on hypotheses that we ought to have thought were very unlikely to come out right when tested. So I think that's a vital part of science. And in fact, it's because of including all these that I can't envision any sharp demarcation. I'm with Karl Popper in this, between science and metaphysics in the privative sense.
That does raise a question, though. The positivists were very fond of demarcation criteria, not just to separate science from metaphysics, but also to separate science from pseudoscience. So the question is, how would you handle a question in which someone might want to bring into question something, for example, like psychoanalytic theory,
yes,
as to whether that really had scientific status or not? And the positivists would handle such a question by their general criteria.
yes.
How would you handle such a question?
Yes, well, I think the effect that consideration has on me is rather that that I'm very suspicious of it and dubious of it. I can conceive that it might be helpful in some of the suggestions, some of the things, perhaps some of the things that are said about dreams, or some of the things that are said about inhibitions from earlier experiences, this way or that, can inspire somebody with who's a more scientific temper to some constructive ideas that will go on. Maybe it's already happened, but the sort of cult that's developed and the trust that's been put into it as something therapeutic and worth spending an awful lot of time and money treating oneself to, that makes the thing certainly a great evil, and I'm not sympathetic with it at all. But I think to this extent, it's more nearly continuous with science than it should be for me to be single-mindedly inclined to brand it as meaningless.
The critics of verificationism used to devise sentences which were apparently meaningful, but which were cooked up in such a way as not to be susceptible of empirical confirmation or falsification either. I seem to recall some sentence along the lines of, there's a planet for whose existence we shall never have any evidence. Would you want to say the same about those sentences as you say about sentences in the outer reaches of mathematics, which is that overall simplicity can be our only guide?
No, I think the situation isn't as clear with those sentences, because those sentences might be related in the way that I was sketching through these various systematic kinships to such sentences, so as to be valuable in the theory, that they're fitting in. They're fitting into the web of belief in such a way as to seem very likely to belong. And well, now in a way, those sentences of higher mathematics have that too in one direction, namely they are results of simply continuing to apply and extrapolate the grammar and lexicon that we've been needing for scientific purposes. And that's and that's a very clear and unconjectural link that they have, and it's the only reason, my only reason for taking them seriously as a part of science. So I think that I think in detail the structural connection is different.
What about the idea of taking the inverted spectrum hypothesis or its negation as just being a sentence in the outer reaches of phenomenology, where once again we'd say, well, we allow it to be meaningful because it's just using over again vocabulary that we use in more workaday circumstances, and we'll once again just let the truth value fall where it may in light of overall simplicity, I guess in which case you'd go for the denial of the inverted spectrum hypothesis.
Yes, well, that's an interesting suggestion, because I was about to wonder, all right, if we admit it, which way is our decision going to go on its truth value?
People wonder about the outer reaches of mathematics as well.
Well, there we can settle for simplicity. I can't see simplicity coming into the act in this case, which is a commentary also on how independent it seems to be from anything scientific.
I wonder if you recognize a class of sentences that are meaningless in a more definitive way than simply not seeming to have any empirical consequences or the possibility of any fitting into the web of belief. I have in mind Wittgenstein's example, it is 5 o'clock on the sun.
Oh, good.
Where it looks as though, although grammatically okay, one feels like saying, well, 5 o'clock hasn't been defined for the sun. It doesn't make any sense to ask whether it's 5 o'clock on the sun.
Yes.
What's your reaction to that kind of sentence?
Well, a characteristic of this kind of example, I suppose, is that we can prove on the basis of principles that we all unhesitatingly accept anyway, I should think, that there couldn't be any criterion, or any criterion that would fit in usefully with the rest of science in which those same terms are used.